I am Matt Easton of Schola Gladiatoria, and this is a great bassinet. I'm okay! Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. So as you can see, I'm having to hold my microphone. There's no perfect solution to wearing a great bassinet and talking into a microphone, it turns out. I could probably clip it down here, but it might get chopped in half by my visor falling down. So this is the first great bassinet I've ever owned. You will hopefully know from my channel and watching my armour playlist that I have talked about great bassinets before. I think I've even worn one before, but I've never owned one before. So this is the first glimpse of my new armour. Many of you will know from watching recent videos I have sold my black armour, the one with the sallet. Now obviously my new armour can go with various different types of helmet. It can go with a sallet, an armet, a great bassinet, they're the most common types, even a chapeau de fer iron hat, various other options, but it has come with a great bassinet, and this is the one modelled fairly closely, well, it's an interpretation of, anyway, it's very similar to the Friedrich the Victorious one in Vienna. So that's not to say that my armour is based on his armour, but we'll talk more about the rest of the armour in the future. So this armour that I bought is second-hand, but was not used very much like my black armour, incidentally, which was also bought second-hand. Now, there's a lot of advantages to buying a second-hand armour. One is you don't have to wait for it. When it's up for sale, you can buy it and you can go and try it on, and if it fits, you can pay for it and walk away with it. Usually getting armour made takes months or years in some cases, so that's nice. Also, it means you can try it on for fit because it's already been made. And the fact is that the person that this armour was made for was exactly the same height as me. That's 184 centimetres, so just over 6 foot, about 6'1", and very similar build to me. There are a few things which are a little bit different. For example, the gauntlets. We'll talk about those in the future. But fundamentally it fits me very well. In fact, it fits me even better than my black armour did. So today we're going to look at my first impressions of a great bassinet. Now, the first thing to say is the great bassinet is a type of helmet which was very, very popular in England and France, but they were worn in other areas as well. You know, the Swiss and Austrians, the Polish, the Germans, the Holy Roman Empire, the Northern Italians, the Spanish, the Portuguese. Everybody wore great bassinets to some degree, but certainly in the study of armour, they're probably most famously associated with the English and French, and you could possibly say the Iberians as well. And they are probably the most protective type of helmet being worn in the 15th and even into the 16th centuries. Now, earlier on we had things like great helms, and they continue in the form of jousting, sort of so-called frog-mouthed helms used for jousting, but they're not great on foot. Now, while my friend Augusto might give you examples of the frog mouth being worn on foot, the fact is that they generally weren't worn on foot very much. Occasionally, they're probably the exception rather than the rule because they don't have very good visibility. The great bassinet, on the other hand, offers almost as good protection as a great helm or jousting helm, but due to the design of the visor here, I'll just put the lock on there, it's a little bit of a fiddle, there we go. This locks as well, so this will show how it goes on and off of the head in a minute, but due to the way that the visor can go up and down, clearly I can now very easily expose my face, I can see around, I can drink, I can talk to people, I can catch my breath if I'm out of breath, much more easily than I can with a frog-mouthed jousting helm. But it offers a huge amount of protection for two main reasons, fundamentally. One is it's very substantial and weighty. So simple laws of physics, if something hits me hard, this has a lot of mass to absorb it, okay? And it's very, very strong as well. The second reason is because it sits, as you will see, on my shoulders, more or less. It actually sits on my head and my shoulders at the same time. Now, it must be said I'm just wearing a t-shirt here, I'm not wearing my harness. When I'm wearing my cuirass, I've got my pauldrons, which sit just slightly outside of this, and I've got my mail collar underneath. It basically fills up the space that's currently between my collarbones, as it were, or shoulders, and the underneath of here. So it does sit a bit more on the shoulders, probably more like that, when I've got all my gear on, but at the moment I've just got a t-shirt on. So therefore, if I get hit downwards, that force is transferred to my shoulders. Brilliant. It's not going into my head and my neck at least not very much, hardly at all. Just to help you relate, when I smash myself on the head with this stick, in fact I've just damaged the stick, you feel, I won't say absolutely nothing, but almost nothing inside the helmet. It certainly doesn't hurt you, it doesn't knock you about, it doesn't ring your head. It's incredibly well suited to taking heavy blows for those two reasons. It's heavy, thick, strong, multiple layers. You'll notice that in many cases you've got steel over other steel. So for example here we've got probably about 1.5mm steel over 2mm steel, huge amounts of steel here. When we put the visor down, you'll notice the visor brow covers the front. I'm having to put this up so you can hear me incidentally, because you won't hear me properly if I put the visor down all the time. The brow of the visor covers the brow of the helmet, so we've got essentially steel, relatively, was about 1.5mm. Then you've got a gap, like a compression zone, crumple zone almost, little gap, about 1mm, and then you've got about 2.5mm of steel. Now this, incidentally, is made by Radoslaus of Poland, and it was made, I think, in 2017. It was only used, I think, a little bit, well, certainly judging by the armour, it's used minimally, and then it was put into long-term storage. So the reason I haven't immediately revealed all of the armour on my channel is because I've been cleaning it and polishing it. So if this looks very shiny, that's me. I did that on my trusty buffing wheel, which is down here. So it was put in long-term storage. It got a little bit of light rust in places and just kind of dirty. Anyway, I've been cleaning it all up. You will see the rest of the harness very soon. So back to the Great Bascinet. So as many of you know, the most popular helmet at this time was the Sallet. But while the Sallet is a great battlefield helmet, it kind of lacks in protection in some regards. Most particularly between the junction between the sallet and the bever, which protects the bottom of your head. The danger is that the two can separate and a thrust can come in the middle. In fact, this is even shown in treatises as a deliberate technique to get through the armoured defence. You don't have that problem, especially when the visor's locked down with a Great Bascinet, because it's all locked together into one piece. Another helmet which sometimes achieved the same goal as a Great Bascinet was an armoured, and then a later type of helmet which comes along really from about the 1480s, 1490s onwards, called the close helmet, which combines some features of the Great Bascinet and the armoured because of the way that it articulates. Maybe we'll do a dedicated video on close helmets in the future. So fundamentally, this is a very protective helmet. It's not as mobile. Now you'll notice the first thing is, because it sits on my shoulders, to look around, there are two things I can do. One is turn my body. There's no big hassle, a bit like Batman. Or I can actually turn the head slightly inside the helmet. Now, don't underestimate that. Because we've got eyeballs that can turn as well, actually, I can see 90 degrees to the side of me that way and that way without turning my body. If I turn it just a little bit, it's absolutely easy. So if I combine the turning of my head and eyes with a very slight turn of my body, I can see completely 180 degrees either side of me. So it's not really a problem. One of the other fantastic things about the Great Bascinet, which often gets overlooked, and which I believe is better with a Great Bascinet compared to an armet, a close helmet, or a sallet, is that with the visor down, I'll just momentarily put it down here, I've actually got really good visibility, because this type is perforated here, here, all the way around here, but also it's quite far away from the face, which psychologically is nice because you don't have something right up against your mouth and eyes. And one of the problems that I personally find psychologically with the sallet is everything's very close to your face. So the eye slit is quite close here, you've got a plate here that's quite close, the bever's quite close. So you feel a bit claustrophobic. I anyway feel a bit claustrophobic when I've got the visor down and the bever up in a sallet. And I know people who have armets who say the same thing, because armets tend to have a wrapper around the front, which is a solid plate here. And if you're breathing heavily, if it's hot weather and you're doing something, you know, like fighting, which is exerting a lot of energy and making you breathe heavily and sweat, it can get very, very claustrophobic in there. The Great Bascinet, however, from what I've experienced so far, is the nicest helmet to be fully enclosed in on foot. And for that reason, for all of the reasons, in fact, that I've just mentioned, these were extremely popular for fighting with poleaxes. So if we look at something like the Beecham Pageant manuscript, for example, in the British Library, you'll see that in war, yeah, lots of people are wearing sallets and armets and stuff like this, when they're fighting on foot with poleaxes, or indeed when they're fighting on horseback with clubs in tournament, they wear a great bassinet, because a great bassinet offers a great combination between protection, especially to your neck and not being concussed and stuff like that, protection to your head and neck and just generally, but also good vision, good breathing. It's fantastic. It's not as good as a fencing mask, obviously, but it's a lot better than most other helmet types. Now, the disadvantages of great bassinets is they are a bit of a faff to get on and off. You'll notice I have a strap here and a strap there, and that actually straps down to my cuirass, which makes it very, very secure, but it means that you need someone else to help you get it on. You can't whip it on and off like you can with a sallet, for example. So you do need help to put it on. It's more of a faff, it's heavier, debatably it's hotter, and stuff like this. So there are disadvantages, and there's one other disadvantage which I don't see mentioned often, and that is if you have this type of visor with lots of perforations in the front, that is fantastic for close combat. That's absolutely awesome if you're fighting with poleaxes on foot or fighting in a melee. But it's not fantastic if people are shooting loads of arrows at you, because of course there are more holes and slits for arrows to find a gap in and potentially penetrate through the visor. Now, it is notable, I think, and interesting that the English loved this great bassinet, but of course the English were predominantly fighting up until 1454 against the French, and they were the ones shooting at the French, and the French were shooting back with crossbows but at a much lower rate of fire, and sometimes they didn't even use their crossbows properly. So the English predominantly were the ones sending the arrows, not receiving the arrows, and so in that and they're fighting in close combat. So the English way of fighting seems to have favoured the great bassinet. Not to say that the French didn't like them as well, but it is interesting that after 1450 their use on the battlefield declines. We don't know exactly why that is, but as the sallet becomes more popular, the great bassinet becomes less popular, and also the armet comes in, so maybe in some regards the armet replaces it, but the armet never seems to really replace the great bassinet, certainly in England and France, for fighting with poleaxes on foot. And even these were used in the 16th century in Henry VIII's time for combats on foot with two-handed sword or poleaxe or whatever. Anyway, so that is a brief overview to the great bassinet. My first impressions so far have been that actually it's way more comfortable, way cooler to wear than I expected. You don't really feel the weight very much, and if anything, the weight feels quite reassuring. You feel almost nothing inside it when you get hit in the head. It's incredibly protective, very good vision compared to other helmets anyway. Very good breathing, everything's far away from your face, which is nice for your breath, not having too much of your own recirculated air quite close to your face. So it's good for all of those things. I'm a big fan of it. The only disadvantage is it changes your centre of gravity a bit because it's quite heavy, and mobility, I guess, and the fact that you can't get it on and off easily yourself. Right, finally, we're just going to look at how this thing comes off. So the first thing is, I should mention, when the visor is down and locked, I've got a locking mechanism there that I won't lock now because it sometimes gets stuck. I need to adjust the locking mechanism slightly because they're binding a bit. Also, the visor doesn't always stay up. If you ram it up, it stays up, but you have to be psychologically prepared for the fact that sometimes it falls down. Just don't be worried about your nose because it can't catch that. So you have to first put the visor up. Then, having put the visor up, there is a catch at the side here. On this particular one, there's a catch at the side. Oh, it's a bit of a fiddle. There we go. And that whole section now opens up. Whoop, and you can take your head out. It's a bit difficult one-handed because I'm holding the microphone. And there we go. That's how the whole thing opens up. So it closes around your head, then you lock the visor down. Now, interesting detail is when you have closed this section, it can, if you twist in the right way, you can make it pop open by itself. But when you close the visor, that can no longer happen. But as I say, this is not, this needs a bit of tweaking on it. So I've already had to adjust the visor bottom lip slightly so it sits better into the bever plate. Oh, but it is a heavy object, but when it's on your head it's not too bad because it's sitting on your shoulders. But there we go, that is the great bassinet. First impressions. I'm sure I have more to talk about this helmet in the future, and watch very soon for the full unveiling of the rest of my armour soon on this channel. I hope this has been interesting. I hope I'll see you back on the channel really soon. I have been Matt Easton, and you know I'll continue to be. Cheers folks. Hi folks, Matt Easton here. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon.
please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.